Testing, 1, 2. Can everyone take their seats, please? I almost feel like I need to put a seatbelt on today or something. Well, we've got a full room, and so I'm going to welcome everyone to the March the 3rd meeting of the Built Heritage Subcommittee of City of Ottawa. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for attending. If you are interested in speaking on any of the items before us today, there are two lovely ladies over there waiting to take your name and bring that forward, and we'll make sure to call you forward. Are there any declarations of interest? None? Okay, so now what we're going to do, I have the minutes here. Minutes from February 12th. Minutes 12 from February 13th in 2014. That's almost a 12, 13, 14. Are there any changes, or can we carry those? Carried? Thank you. So now on to the agenda. The first item is the application for demolition of Bradley's General Store. We have no one signed up to speak, but we are going to hold that for comments from the ward councillor. Number 2, the application to demolish and construct a new structure at 7 Clarence Street. We have speakers on that, so we'll be holding that one. The addition of 30 Oriole Drive to the City of Ottawa Heritage Register. Do we have speakers on that? I believe so. We have speakers, so we'll be holding that. And on number 4 is the application to alter 269 McLeod Street, a property designated in Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act and located in the Centertown Heritage Conservation District. We have no speakers. I know that we have representatives of the applicant if anyone has any questions, or would the committee care to carry that? Carried? Okay. Thank you. So if you're here for McLeod Street, you're free to leave. Thank you. Okay, so we will go back to item number 1, and I just wanted to say a few words because we have 2 significant properties here before us today. Not that Oriole isn't, but we're talking about in heritage buildings in 2 communities that have been very, very active in communicating with us, in having their say, in addressing their concerns. And we know, our committee, our staff know that they're very important to the Stittsville community and certainly the Byward Market. And both of them today are applying for demolition. So I'm going to ask the ward councillor to intro Stittsville because we have had so much communication on it. And then if anyone has any questions, that's good, because we do have people, we have representatives to speak to the consultant that we didn't have the last time, that made the comments on the conditions, etc., should you wish to do that. Councillor Kadri?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and good morning. Just coming back to your comments about the importance of the building in terms of Stittsville Main Street. For those of the people that don't know what this building is all about, this is an icon in the community, and it has been since it was constructed, pretty much. It's unfortunate that the fire will, compromised and destroyed this building interior, and the concern right now is, can this building be redeveloped? From the last meeting, we went back as a Built Heritage Subcommittee and asked for a second opinion on this building to see, what can be done, if anything, to this building. That opinion basically came back confirming the original opinion of the property owner's engineer. And, the concern again comes back to, even if you were to reconstruct, or not reconstruct, but save the facades of the building that was recommended, the east facade, the north and south facade, there are still issues with those facades that you would have to repair and going forward. And one of those concerns is on the facade that's facing the east side of the building, which has been painted about 3 or 4 times. And what the engineers seem to suggest, that if you were to save that facade, that's going to create a compromise on the bricks themselves. And once that's happened, or if that happens, then to get the replacement bricks would be from the other parts of the building. And again, how, strength-wise, how good they are, and those questions still are there. But having said all that, I don't want to take away the importance of this building to the community. As I said, it's a very important building to the community. It's always acted as a gathering place. It was a grocery store or a community store. It was also previously as a post office, and so people used to come to this building as a gathering place. Coming back to what's in the present plans of Stittsville Main Street, I am currently working with the City of Ottawa to design a community design plan for Stittsville Main Street. And in that design plan, we already discussed to reserve this area as a historic area going forward. I mean, there's only 2 buildings of heritage value in this particular section that are designated. One was this 1518 Main Street, and one is right beside it, which has good character as a heritage building. The community design plan, as it reads currently, just one of the items, and I'll just point a couple of items on that. A heritage evaluation of the potential to integrate existing building listed in Figure 8 will be required with a site plan application for a property within the precinct. So if another person comes up to develop a property on this area that's identified as a historic area, then they would be, as it suggests, requested to incorporate some of the features of the building that are already existing. Under the Built Heritage section, which is 4.1 in this, design guidelines will be prepared to encourage infill development that is compatible with adjacent buildings. The design guidelines will offer a means of conserving and cohesiveness of existing streetscape types and discouraging incompatible infill development. So basically what that says, ladies and gentlemen, that anything going forward in the site would be looking for features that are currently existing on this building. And one of those features that you can say, if you looked at the pictures in the report, in its days gone by, this building had gable features, this building had some awning features. Those are the kind of things that we would be interested in incorporating into a new building going up in this area. To take the current building and just save its facade, I think would limit what could be done in the future with that site. I would, love to see the facade saved. The only problem with saving the facade is if the new developer comes in and builds a 4-story high building, which he would be permitted if this wasn't a historic district, that would stick out over and above the facade. And I don't know whether that would look eye-appealing with a new modern structure in behind this old facade, not to mention, like I said earlier, about the compromising of this facade going forward. In terms of the streetscape, again through the Stittsville Main Street Design Guideline, we're working towards hopefully regenerating that street, and I think this would be a good piece to start with in order to regenerate that Main Street going forward, keeping in mind all this current characters on that part of this Main Street, in terms of the heritage features and so on. I think the other thing we can do also is, with the new developer coming in, is maybe ask to see if we can incorporate some of the materials, if they're salvageable, into the new building. The final point I would say about this at the present time is in terms of going forward, what I would like to do, and as suggested by Goulburn Historical Museum, that we save some of these features out of this building and for austerity purposes or for historical purposes, save them in the museum, as well as take records of this building, as I said at the last meeting, create a book by, a log of this building internally as well as externally, as well as history. And I think that would be something that could be viewed at a library, for example, on an ongoing basis. So, Madam Chair, what I would suggest is, I would support the staff's recommendation on this particular item this morning, and I wait for any further discussion by the committee. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And again, we have heard from so many people and so many organizations within Stittsville and in the former Goulburn Township, and really appreciate all of the input that we've had from everyone from the start. This has been sad when we heard the day of the fire, for sure, and the concern that we've had at the Built Heritage Committee. Does anyone on the committee have any questions of any of the people that are here? Well, is the item carried then? Carried. Thank you very much today for coming out again, Councillor Kadri.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And like I said, I still take this with a grain of salt, this decision that the committee is making this morning. Thank you.
And thanks and please thank your community members and representatives as you work with them on the Stittsville Main Street Community Design Plan. Thank you very much. Okay, so now we're going on to number two, which is 7 Clarence Street. We are going to have a presentation on this. We did have a presentation on Stittsville, Maine, the last meeting when we moved the deferral, if you recall. And while you're getting ready, I'd just like to make a few brief remarks in regards to the application of 7 Clarence Street. Clearly, I think that we can do better in our communications on these very important heritage properties. But I would say that we have learned a lot and come a long way since the days of LACAC, and any of you and some of you come to every single meeting of Built Heritage, and we appreciate that. But the interest has never been higher, I would say, with regard to heritage and its significance and importance in our city. So we are sincerely concerned about the heritage properties in the neighborhoods that they are in, and we believe in the case of the properties that are under the jurisdiction of the National Capital Commission that they do too. The city's become aware of the structural problems at 7 Clarence, which is a heritage building, and it's in the heart of the Byward Market Heritage Conservation District, and most of you in the room know that. Hoarding has been in place to protect the public as the building has structural problems and there is concern about possible collapse. Late in 2013, the NCC indicated that it would be seeking to demolish the building because of its concern for public safety. It shared all of its studies with the structures on the structure with staff at the city. So on December the 18th of last year, the Planning and Growth Management Department made the decision to hire an engineer to independently review the NCC's information, as we do from time to time, an analysis of the building's condition, and the NCC was happy to accommodate this and allowed our staff and our consulting engineer, who many of you know as well is John Cook, access to the site and to do their reports. Then in January, the city staff and Mr. Cook met with the NCC staff and engineer at the site and examined the building. And on January 14th, the Heritage Planning staff met at the NCC with the Commission's design team, including the architect for a proposed building at the site. On January 22nd, the city received Mr. Cook's report on the building, indicating it was not in danger of imminent collapse, but substantiating the NCC's main points. The city conveyed this information to the NCC. On February the 3rd, the city received an application under the Ontario Heritage Act for demolition of the building and proposing a new addition at the address, the keyword being addition. On February 13th, the new CEO of the NCC, Mr. Mark Christensen, met at City Hall with myself, and I think Councillor Fleury was there, and some of our staff. This was shortly after he had been named the CEO. Vice Chair Podolsky was out of town and unable to attend. But we explained to him, they gave us the opportunity to explain to him the process for applications for demolition and approval of new additions in the Heritage Conservation District. It really was a great opportunity to meet with the new face of the NCC and have a chat with him about heritage and why it's important to us, and talk about the future too, because much of what we will do in the next years, whether it's these faces around the table or your faces in the room, but people will be working to safeguard and improve the heritage buildings that are under the jurisdiction of the NCC. I can tell you that with absolute certainty that there is a willingness for change, including one thing that I asked is, you you have work plans. We're going to be, well, actually, the comment was, we're going to be doing a lot of work in the on our properties in the Byward Market area and the Sussex area and that, and we have work plans and that. I said, why don't we discuss those? I think that's important that we know the amount of input, the financially and effort that the NCC is going to be putting into these buildings, and I think that it's important that the public knows that. And I think that with every meeting, what I take away is that we could have done it a little bit better to better communicate back and forth between you and the audience and us up here. So I am, pardon? Yeah, sooner. And you can tell from, and this is why I've actually gone over all of these points and these dates to show you the amount of work that's gone into getting us. But really, I think where I certainly was aware that we could have done better is when there was such surprise and concern and with the application itself. So what it comes down to at the end of the day, really, is that we make decisions here and at the Planning Committee and at Council based on fact and expert evaluation and advice, and that's what we will do here. So in this body, the Planning Committee and then the Council is going to accept the recommendation to demolish, if it does, accept the recommendation to demolish the building at 7 Clarence after the public debate, which will happen today at this committee, for the reasons presented by the NCC and the conclusions obtained in the staff report. The NCC has indicated that it is willing to continue to work with the city staff and concerned residents on possible alterations to the proposed replacement. So I thought that was important that you know that too. And my personal view is that if we work in cooperation with the National Capital Commission, which has stewardship over so many properties, heritage properties in Ottawa, we can do more to protect the heritage of this capital city. So Sally, are you ready to roll with your presentation? Thank you for allowing me that little bit of conversation. I tend to be one that is quick with the committees, and I don't want to delay it or beleaguer it, but we really are trending in a different way with heritage, and I think that it's important that as often as we can say that, we should.
So as the Chair mentioned, this is an application under the Ontario Heritage Act for demolition and new construction of an addition at 7 Clarence Street. The property is located within the Byward Market Heritage Conservation District and is a rear addition to 461-463 Sussex Drive, which is shown here as a long building on, where's my mouse here? Long building on Sussex. Is this working? Can you see if it works? Oh. There it is. Excuse me. This is the building in after 1915. It was originally constructed as a 3-story building attached and built as an addition to the building on Sussex Drive at 461-463 in the 1880s. In the early 20th century, the original roof of the larger building, of the larger portion of the building, was removed, and a mansard was applied to create additional space in the attic. At this point, point, the new building didn't fit under the eaves, or the 7 Clarence didn't fit under the eaves of that building, so it was shortened. And as you can see, at that time there was a secondary cornice here, but it has since disappeared. So many buttons. Oh, okay. I'll just use this one. So here is the subject property. It is this is the primary building, and this is 7 Clarence Street. As you can see, it's a simple stone building, with 2 windows and a storefront. Another view looking east along Sussex Drive. This is the former patio of the building. The rear view showing how the interface of the building with the Tin House Court. Again, this was prior to, it had been, at that point, it was empty. You can see that there's a hoarding here, but or a safety fence here prior to the hoarding, and this is the view through to Tin House Court and beyond. This is hard. Again, this is facing northwest prior to the hoarding being installed. You can see the way that the property is lower than the eaves of the mansard roof. Interestingly, there are windows here and doors, and the current roof is used by the tenants in the larger building, so as it's linked in. This is a view also facing northwest, but a little farther east along Clarence Street, taken on Saturday, just to give an idea of the streetscape and the interplay of the buildings, the American Embassy, and here now, because of the safety concerns, there's now a net around here, so if it collapsed, it would not actually collapse onto the sidewalk or into the square. So you can see that this is a view as you're walking westwards, so you can see the building, which is also currently being restored. There's work going on by the National Capital Commission, so the building is very much covered in hoarding right now. This is the Tin House Court, which there's an opening to this courtyard from the east side of the 7 Clarence building. This opening will remain, and this shows the courtyard system, which has been developed by the National Capital Commission since the 1970s, and it features the Tin House, which was a front facade of the home of a tinsmith that was saved and hung here in the 1970s, and a fountain, and since this original the impetus behind the courtyard system began, this courtyard actually has been completed. When it was initially designed, there were no buildings to its east, and then in the last 15 years there's been new construction to the east, further enclosing the courtyard and giving it a sense of place, an increased sense of enclosure. So, the Ontario Heritage Act. The property is designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And in Heritage Conservation District, an application to demolish the designated heritage buildings requires City Council approval, and the application for new construction in a Heritage Conservation District requires City Council approval. So that is what is in front of you today. So recommendation 1 is to demolish 7 Clarence in addition to 461, 463 Sussex Drive. As Chair Harder explained at the beginning of the meeting, there has been a lot of concern and a lot of analysis of the condition of the building at 7 Clarence. The NCC engineer, Mr. Jokinen, conducted studies which determined that because of the poor initial quality of the stone and mortar, the age of the building and the construction techniques, and this was as it was constructed very much as an addition to a much finer building, have meant that the building has reached the end of its life cycle. As Chair Harder said, that we wanted to make sure that this was that we agreed with this, and the NCC agreed to a meeting between John Cook, an engineer hired by the city, and Mr. Jokinen on site in early January. I was there, as were many people helping us to understand the building from the National Capital Commission. So this is the east facade, which shows that although the front facade is dressed stone, as you could see in my earlier pictures, this is rough cut stone laid in uneven courses. One of the things that the reports reveal is that in between the walls there are two layers of stone, and in between the walls of the two layers there are piles of sand where the mortar has disintegrated and fallen to the bottom. In addition, usually in a wall construction like this, there are what's called headers, which join the two walls together, and there are no headers here, so the two walls are not holding each other up. Why does this not move? This was again an example of there were boreholes and holes drilled, and it was very thorough analysis. And because the building is now parts of it are unsafe, it was harder and shrouded in tarpaulins with wires in them. It was harder for Mr. Cook to get a thorough analysis, and so all the previous findings of the NCC were shared with him, so he could do his visual analysis, but also use their reports, so he had a clear picture of the condition of the building. Again, here are further pictures. So the recommendation of Mr. Cook, which is on, I think, document 7 in your report, and included in the report to committee and council, recommends the conclusion is that while the building, that this wall may be salvaged and concern, it would be expensive and require major intervention. Once the hard exterior mortar is removed, there could be extensive stone damage. And he goes on to say, as a result, my recommendation would be to document the building for historical record and demolish it. And then, again, he does disagree on one matter with the NCC's engineer, that is the imminence of its collapse. He feels that the evidence is that it is not in imminent danger of collapse, but certainly, again, cannot be salvaged. So this, then we move on to the application which is in front of you today, which is a proposed replacement building, which is a 2-story opaque and transparent glass structure, which is 1.4 meters taller than the original, 2 meters wider, and is designed as a simple rectangle with cornices to match the adjacent building. This is a site plan of the proposed building, and you can see here that this dotted line is the footprint of the existing building, and this 2 meters wider is the proposed building. The building is this is subject to site plan control, and so that process is underway and the application will be completed and submitted prior to the consideration of this report at City Council. But I would like to add that some of these features, such as patios, etc., will still be considered during the site plan control process, so they certainly could change. So what we are mostly looking at today is the application under the Heritage Act for new construction. So this is an elevations of the street with the new addition proposed. It is a simple glass box with translucent glass at the top and an open glass at the bottom. It was designed for the division between the first and second story to match the cornice of the existing building, and there is a definite break between the new construction and the old. You will remember you've seen breaks like this to distinguish between the two parts of the building. That is a feature that you will have seen in Arts Court, which you supported in July, and also in the reconstruction of the Ogilvy's buildings. This device to separate new and old is often referred to as a hyphen. So. Again, the building is lower than it meets the eaves of the building to which it is adjacent, and the courtyard here is, and the opening remains. From the interior of the courtyard, you see the rear of the building, and this is the side elevation. Again, this is mostly translucent, and then there are windows, clearer windows on the second floor. So where you see the differently colored glass, that is where windows will be. The stone interior is not retaining the existing wall. It is retaining some of the stone, and the hope is that it can be applied to this wall, so the impression of stone building to the west can be discerned. And these are pictures of the courtyard. This is the courtyard today as you see it looking north to the Notre Dame Basilica. It's a kind of a dark picture, so you can't see the Tin House Court there. And this is to the south. To the north. This is the south. So like many courtyards in the Byward Market system of courtyards, it has varying size of entrances. Across the street, the courtyards that are in the Institut Jeanne d'Arc are a meter wide. Farther north, the courtyards to Clarendon Court are wider. So the courtyard system is a long system that runs from George northwards, but the size of the courtyards and the entrances to the courtyards vary. And a lot of the experience of the courtyard is about entering, leaving the bustle of the street and into a different place. And so, again, some entrances are very narrow and some are very wide. There is an example of the one that is directly to the first block to the south of this, so a very narrow courtyard. So staff recommendation today is to approve the demolition of the building due to its construction, its condition, and the difficulties with in replacing it. Approve the new difficulties in repairing it. Approve the new construction, delegate minor changes to the general manager, and issue the permit with a 2-year expiration date. The Byward Market Heritage Conservation Districts address infill in the Heritage Conservation District. Important in that new work in an area like this must respect the existing scale, material, and form of the district. It should be of its own time, designed in a contemporary vernacular consistent with the traditions of the area. The infill guide, those are general principles. The infill guidelines are replicate the pattern of retail at grade, which this would do, retail or commercial, separate the first and second floors by a secondary cornice, which this does, make storefronts be about 9 meters wide. The new storefront is about 9 meters wide. Ensure that setbacks and height respect adjacent heritage properties. This is lower than the eaves of the building to which it is attached, and it is lower in height than the adjacent heritage property, the Blackthorn, to the east, and maintain courts and mid-block pedestrian linkages, which this does. Standards and guidelines, the Parks Canada City Council approved Parks Canada standards and guidelines. And Standard 1 is conserve the heritage value of an historic place, and Standard 11 is conserve the heritage value when creating new additions. Make the new work physically and visually compatible with, subordinate to, and distinguishable from the historic place. And although this building is expressed in glass, it is transparent on the bottom, but the glass on the top is gray and blends in with the stone construction to the west, and is complementary to the brick construction of the Blackthorn restaurant to the east. The provincial policy statement addresses heritage conservation and says built heritage resources and cultural landscapes shall be conserved. In this instance, we regret that the building has been determined not to be salvageable, but certainly the cultural heritage landscape of the Byward Market will be conserved by the insertion of a building that is generally the same size and location. It's interesting that the courthouse courtyard system in the Byward Market is much beloved, a recent intervention, but it is part of the cultural heritage landscape of the Byward Market now, and that will also be conserved. The Commonwealth Heritage Resource Management produced a cultural heritage impact statement, which is available at request from the clerk's office, and its conclusion was that the redevelopment proposal is a challenging interpretation being introduced into the Byward Market, and that elements of the original buildings be expressed. So the elements will be the retention of the stone and the cladding of the interior wall. Heritage Ottawa was notified of the application, and its comments have been circulated. Lower Town West also was, and its comments were circulated to you this morning. Neighbors within 30 meters of the property were notified, and you've received many of the copies of many of the comments. Again, Lower Town also was notified earlier, and the first letter that they wrote is included in the staff report. They have written two. So, conclusion, the department supports this application because two engineers with expertise in heritage building conservation agreed that it could not be retained, having reached the end of its life cycle, and that it met the ACD guidelines, the standards and guidelines, has regard for the provincial policy statement, and conserves the heritage value of the Byward Market as an historic place. Thank you. Yeah. Which one do you think I should go back to?
Thank you very much. We do have a lot of speakers, but I thought that I would ask the committee if you have any.
I want to go back to a picture of the building.
I'm not introducing it yet. I thought if you have any high-level questions right now, there'll be time for others, or would you want to hear from the delegations first? Delegations first? Okay. Councillor Clark advises he has a 10-minute speech when it's his turn, so we'll all wait with bated breath. Yeah, we'll be yeas and nays will be the Cullen rule for sure. Okay. The first ones up it's the NCC representatives. Christopher Zwinski, project manager, David Scarlett, and Sandra Pasek. You've all come forward, please. You've all registered individually, so I'll give you that time in that fashion. I'll give you time, not necessarily 15 minutes, but come on forward. Do you have a presentation? Do you have a presentation? Okay, perfect. Have a seat.
David, do you want a particular image? Do you want a particular image up on the screen? No, not yet. Okay.
And David, you're the chief architect? You press the button. There you go.
Yes, I'm chief architect of the National Capital Commission.
And I'll just tell you that these things are not very good at picking up unless you are right on top of them. So,
is my voice coming through okay?
Yes. Just don't move your head. Hold your breath. Thank you.
I have a short verbal presentation for 5 minutes, and we'd be pleased to answer questions thereafter. I'd like to thank you all for this opportunity to address the committee. Clearly, we don't take lightly the fact that this 1870s warehouse has reached the end of its life cycle, despite the repairs that we've gone back in the file and verified. All our engineering studies drive us to the conclusion that the building must be taken down. And that brings us to the question of what do we do? We propose to replace 7 Clarence with a sensitively designed modern structure that respects and integrates well with the surrounding heritage character. We want the new structure to be an excellent high-quality intervention that upholds the Byward Market Heritage Conservation District design guidelines. And in concert with these guidelines, we want the structure to be similar in scale and, very importantly, to not only preserve but to enhance the lovely courtyard. It was actually designed from the outside in. We were as concerned about the floor plate and the functionality inside the building, but very and foremost concerned about how it fits in the streetscape and the courtyard. Our intent is that the new structure be an innovative, energy-efficient, LEED Gold standard design that will reuse as much as we can from the existing building. As we take down the existing building, we would salvage whatever we can. Leading up to today's meeting, we shared the proposed concept with our board of directors. They signaled go forward. We've also presented it and heard critique from the NCC's Advisory Committee on Planning, Design and Realty. This committee consists of Canadian experts in urban planning, urban design and architecture. They were very supportive of the proposed design. We've received very positive feedback from some of the community who praised the state-of-the-art design, but in the stakeholders meeting of February 24th, we also heard clearly concerns raised about who the potential tenants might be, the noise that can emanate from the building, concerns about glare and lighting, and first and foremost, the materiality of the structure and the reduction of the courtyard entrance. Those seem to be 2 concerns. These are all matters we're reviewing carefully prior to fulfilling our commitment to meet with those community stakeholders again later this month. Our CEO, Dr. Mark Christensen, has made a commitment to the residents, tenants, and businesses to make every effort to return the Tin House Courtyard to a high standard of aesthetics and functionality as expeditiously as possible, taking into account the heritage character of the area. We are happy to address any questions you might have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Is anyone else making your own? Perfect. Okay. So I know I'm sure we have lots of questions. Not trustee, member Smallwood. Sandy.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. My question and my concern refers to a report that came from John Cook, and I refer to a comment you made that the asset had reached the end of its life cycle, which I find troubling to a certain extent because I'm not. This will be a case where we've lost this building, but I'm not sure we're looking at it the loss for the right reasons. It seems to me, based on this report, page 27 on my screen here, it refers to interventions that were done in the 1990s, and the engineer uses the term, unfortunately this mortar was shallow and no attempt was made to consolidate the core of the wall at that time. I gather from his report that what it seems the reason we're losing the building is because some mistakes were made when work was done in the 1990s. The mortar that was used was not lime-rich, which is what is traditionally used by in historic restorations. It was rather a very inflexible mortar, and that is what is leading to the problem that we see today. So I think I would be more comfortable if we just said that there was a mistake made, and that mistake is now leading to the demolition of this building. It may be an unfortunate mistake, but I don't think we should be saying it's because the building is old. There's a lot of older buildings around, lots built with inferior materials, but they're still around because they've been properly maintained. So I think that's one of the concerns that I have, and I wonder, have you reviewed this report, and are you aware of that, and was there any discussion as to what the mistake was made? And I guess my particular concern is to make sure this didn't happen overnight. In fact, Mr. Cook is suggesting that the building isn't moving, so it's not in imminent danger of collapse. And I just wonder how many other NCC buildings there might be where this situation could be the same thing. Thank you.
I'll address the latter part of the statement and then go back to the earlier part. We have an ongoing life cycle inspection program at the NCC for heritage buildings and non-heritage buildings. We try and go through them on a regular cycle in order to anticipate what might be capital works that are required in the future year's planning. In fact, the exercise that saw us discover the structural instabilities at 7 Clarence comes from just that program. In 2007, we started looking at the line of buildings along Sussex, and we extended the focus to 7 Clarence in 2012, looking for getting together the plans for general rehabilitation and universal access upgrades. So with the question, how many others are there? We are obviously, like any landowner, trying to anticipate what are the requirements, and we have a very thorough exercise of fanning out across the portfolios to make sure for buildings, bridges, and so forth, we understand what are the capital requirements that are on the horizon. With regards to the mortar and the statement that is in Mr. Cook's report, he's quite right. The mortar that was put in the walls in the 1990s was a hard mortar that was entrapping moisture in the wall. That certainly did not help. But if you read that report and the Jokin report together, what you get is a characterization that the initial 1870s building was relatively low-grade construction as an addition. The materials that were used, and certainly the technology that was used, made it vulnerable. He's talking about the hard Portland cement type mortars, but the very nature of the wall with the cavity where we're losing all the interiors, the Portland cement exacerbated it, but it is not the Portland cement that has been the demise of the building. The NCC took ownership of the building in 1961, we believe, from the records. We've come back through our files to look at cyclical maintenance that had been done. One of the issues that has played into it is that we had a tenant in there in the 70s through to just recently. They had to be moved out because of the structural instability. And from the inside, we were not doing kind of destructive inspections. From the outside, the maintenance work on repointing was being done cyclically, and people were of the impression that it was stable. I think that when we look at photographs from the 1970s, there's one on city records which show the stress that this structure was suffering in early 70s. And you can see that the coping stones and the cornice and so forth have been deteriorated, and that's in 1971. So I think what we're dealing with today is a situation that takes its root many decades earlier.
Thank you. Other questions before we go to the delegations? Vice Chair Podolsky?
David, good morning. Good morning, all. Chair Harder, I think that there are a few questions that I would like to put to David Scarlett and his team, if you wouldn't mind, to help this committee and the public understand the nature of the NCC's mandate here on what was called the Mile of History and the courtyard system, but specifically it has to do with your direction to the architects and the intention with the design of the new addition that is proposed. You're proposing something that is higher than what's existing and a larger footprint, and of course in its materiality is a contrast to the character of the area. So I have some specific questions that would help me and others to understand what brought you to where you are here. The first is that you said that the proposed addition was being designed from the outside in, rather than looking at the requirements, the functional requirements of the addition that you've assigned. In your studies of the streetscape and in the significance of the Heritage District and the buildings along Sussex, did you take into account in establishing the height, the additional height to this building, that from views along Clarence, you would be obscuring the views of the mansard roof that was done in 1915 that add to the reading of the whole of 461, 465 Sussex as a mansard roof block, because you can see from the views, not this particular view, but so the question is, did you look at the existing height of the building and the proposed additional height and find that the obscuring of views was of no consequence to you? And if so, why?
We started thinking that we would do this addition trying to uphold the existing massing, and one of the key attributes being keeping that parapet below the level of the cornice. I believe Sally's presentation referenced that it is 1.4 meters taller than previous. Yes. We can be flexible on the actual level of the parapet, provided that we're respecting codes and norms for, roof access and so forth. We don't want to drop that parapet such that we have to have safety anchors and so forth. We'd prefer to have a kind of waist-height parapet around. When we look at the image that's up on the screen, the existing is clearly below. We are moving up. We can look at that for sure.
Okay, because that's quite important, because I think the second question also has to do with the size of the footprint of the proposed addition. There are very inviting views from Clarence Street that have been shown on the screen and that are part of the the tourist images of the National Capital. And the views from Clarence Street eastward towards the cathedral and into the courtyard show an inviting view of the courtyard, Tin House Court, and the view of the Tin House itself, which is an iconic piece of, let's call it public art. By increasing the size of the footprint and narrowing the corridor between Clarence and the courtyard, did you study the impact of the wider view on the view planes to the Tin House?
We've looked at the massing as it relates to sun and shade, view lines, streetscape, and so forth. The actual increase in width relates mostly to the interior floor plan needing to be somewhat wider to accommodate universal accessibility requirements. And I'll point out that the Byward Market Heritage Conservation guidelines talk about a 9-meter street frontage. By increasing these 2 meters of width, we feel that we're not eroding the views into the courtyard. And that, in fact, in some ways, we're enhancing the overall entrance to the courtyard experience for the public and visitors.
Okay. And the third question really has to do with the materiality, the glass box that's being proposed. I'm not going to comment any philosophical question about this, but certainly in the heritage character statement that is attributed to this building, there are 8 points that are indicating that the existing 7 Clarence has a series of attributes, and that the policy for replacement in the district needs to give regard to these heritage character statements, which has to do with the window, the materiality, and the proposal that is in front of us is basically obliterates any of those character-defining elements. And I guess my question is, if you reconsider the design, as I understand is being entertained, would you consider a change in the materiality that is being proposed to better reflect the heritage character-defining statements that are in the Byward Market District guidelines?
Last week I was actually asking my colleagues, how many schemes did we study to end up with what we've submitted to the city as the proposed new bill? We figured that it was somewhere between 6 and 10 schemes that we'd put together. Our starting point was schemes that had a lot of masonry in them with a punched window format. With time, as we developed the design, we concluded that, in fact, what we're putting forward to the city at this point had more benefits than going with the conventional stone punched window approach. We are looking forward to meeting with stakeholders late in March, by which time we'll have gone and picked up all the comments that we've got, and we'll be looking at the overall quotient of stone that's in the scheme.
I have another question, and that is that both 461 and 465 Sussex and 7 Clarence have been studied by the Federal Heritage Building Review Office, FIBRO. There are FIBRO reports on both of these buildings, and my understanding is that they are designated by FIBRO. And the NCC and the federal policy encourages departments that possess properties of heritage value to go to FIBRO, and you know this very well yourself because you're occasionally a member of FIBRO. Did you go to FIBRO and seek their advice on this proposed addition?
In fact, the process is that where it's the two buildings that are adjoining, 465 and 457, are FIBRO recognized. There's a delegation back to the NCC for us to inform and advise of works on those. I actually had a conversation last week with FIBRO on the project that we have here in front of you today, explaining our process and how we were upholding the policy within the federal government. I'll point out that the federal government has a rigorous kind of series of criteria for determining what is and is not FIBRO recognized. It was great interest. I saw the city's process and the FIBRO. Here we have an instance where 7 Clarence is not FIBRO recognized, whereas for the city it did make the heritage classification. That is just to be noted. We're trying to handle the 7 Clarence dossier, like the 465, with the utmost care, so that we're doing the absolute right thing. Not only because of heritage, but because of the urban setting on the courtyard.
Just the last question on this relating to FIBRO. I mean, clearly there's a lot of concern from the heritage community, and the members of this committee need to have sufficient expert opinion on it. We have the staff report, which is fine and good, but would you be prepared to voluntarily go to FIBRO and ask their advice on the on the proposed addition, because they have a national mandate? They've done a report on the building. They've done a report on 461, 465, and the others on Sussex. It would seem to me that this would help clear the air very easily and not put it into an area of negotiation and subjectivity, so that if there was a FIBRO report, an intervention report, and if you did that voluntarily, that would help everybody, including the city, in assessing the merits of the proposal.
It would be extraordinary, but absolutely, I'd be pleased to take it to FIBRO if that assists. It doesn't normally fall under their policy that they would be doing an intervention review on a non-heritage building, but if they'll entertain the request, we can see if we can make that happen. I must say that we are very focused on the stakeholder meetings that we've been holding, and we look forward to continuing to work on that direction. However, if we want to mix in an intervention review by FIBRO, and they'll have us, we'd be pleased to do so.
Good. Thank you.
Are you finished?
I had a question of staff, if that was possible, but there might be other questions to that member.
Oh, so you have no more questions of the NCC? Okay. Questions of the NCC?
Now, did I hear you right that you will consider changing the materials?
We're getting a lot of diverse advice, and it's amongst many of the options that are on the table. We've got people that are saying, love it. We've got people that are saying that they don't. We've got people saying, do it as you've shown it. Others saying, what about stone? What we do undertake is that over the next weeks, we're in the crucible trying to get ready to be back with the stakeholders to talk about what are the appropriate gestures given the feedback we're getting.
I don't find that to be as forward-going as I'd like to see it, I guess. Seems to me...
We'd be pleased to go through the stone schemes and entertain it.
Okay, well, I'll speak to it when the time comes for sure.
Thank you. And anyone else have questions of the NCC? One of the things that I think that we're going to need to have, if because of the public interest here, is an extension of the 90-day period. So when it comes to the motion, I'm going to be asking that it be broken down into, rather than the whole motion, pieces of it. And maybe, I think that Vice Chair Podolsky is working on a motion as well to bring forward that will speak to that, but so that we're not tied into, we're not constrained by a time period that we may not be able to work with. One of the things that, for example, Council doesn't meet again until the 27th, is that it? And 26th, so the 25th is planning, and then the 26th. So at that point, between now and then, I think there'd be time for the discussion between the city staff and yourselves on what kind of a time you'd be willing to agree to in just with that piece. So the item 2 of the motion. So just give some thought to that. Okay? Thank you. Thank you very much for coming today. Next up, we have, put my glasses on, I'll be able to tell, Ms. Jerry Gray. Ms. Gray, are you here? Hello. After Ms. Gray, we have Leslie Maitland, Liz McKenzie, Jamie Robertson, and David Fleming. Welcome.
Thank you. I've been very interested in this presentation. My concerns are related to the fact I've lived in the market area since the early 80s, and I've watched how buildings and facilities and spaces have changed, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. But while I don't oppose the destruction of 7 Clarence for safety reasons, I am concerned that the building should retain a quality that is similar to the heritage structure that is now there. And when I look at the glass cladding, I'm concerned by the weight and bulk of it. It looks very out of keeping with the other buildings in the area, other than, the back of the one, I can't remember the name of the courtyard, the lunch place on off of York Street. As you enter the courtyard there, there's a building that's been modernized, but it's kind of hidden, and it looks okay. I used to live above it, so I know where I've watched this sort of conversion change. And what I also was confused by at first, I got some drawings last night in my email, and I hadn't seen these drawings before, the building. I think there's some aspects of it that are quite attractive, but what concerns me is the way the seating will encroach on the tin courtyard, and I think that it's something to be considered. The other thing to be considered, and this is something that bothers me even more, is how many more restaurants do we need in the market? I noticed Memories is going up in the courtyard that is opposite. It's called the Beaux-Arts courtyard, and that building too needs reconstruction and improvement. It sort of looks like it's falling apart. So I'm concerned about more restaurants in relationship to the market, and are we going to lose the flavors of the farmers market as a result of all this construction? And also, can the merchants survive the competition, too? These are other questions to ask. We won't have one memories, we'll have two memories. The memory that has passed and been deconstruction, and the new memories that will be the restaurant. That's about all I have to say.
I just had a question. Did you say that the seating is encroaching on the entrance to?
Yes, to the tin courtyard.
So the expansion of the outdoor patio area?
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, it looks like it's encroaching from what I see. I'm not 100% sure that's what's intended in the drawings, but if you look up there, Clarence is there.
Right.
And there's the proposed space for seating is much wider than the courtyard itself. And the courtyard is quite crowded in the summer, too. I actually love living there.
I don't blame you.
And I see it every day, so I do know what I'm talking about in terms of space and accessibility and uses. And I find right now the state of the courtyard very distressing.
So the part that the NCC wants to bring that back to its former grandeur and enhance it, that must be appealing to you aside from the building at all, just the investment in the tin house.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Anyone have
You're
any
welcome.
questions of Ms. Gray? Thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
Leslie Maitland? Welcome back, Leslie.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair and members of the committee, for listening to me today, and for the new people in the audience. I'm here to represent Heritage Ottawa. I'm not going to dwell upon the reasons for demolition of this building. We're all distressed that it has come to this state. I'd like to focus on the proposed replacement structure and look at it both from the perspective of its positive and its negative impacts on the Heritage Conservation District. Ms. Coots walked us through the suite of policy and planning documents that pertain to this Category 1 building, which has a heritage overlay. And we could go through all those policy and planning documents all over again, but I would like to focus on the byward market guideline that states new work in an area like this must respect the existing scale, material, and form of the district. However, it should be of its own time, designed in a contemporary vernacular, consistent with the traditions of the area. With these guidelines in mind and the other documents in the policy frameworks, it's clear that the replacement structure proposed by the National Capital Commission is appropriate in many respects. It's a smaller scale from the building to which it is appended. The proposed retention of the party wall of its neighboring building, should it prove feasible, is a good interior feature, keeping in mind that this being a Part 5 designation, nothing about the interior is designated. There's a good distinction between old and new buildings, and it has a very pleasing pedestrian-friendly quality. With respect to its impact upon the FIBRO-designated building, I support Vice Chair Podolsky's question as to whether FIBRO should be consulted because there is an impact on their designated building, and I get the sense that a conversation as of last week seems a bit late in the dialogue. The proposal is not appropriate at all in terms of materials and fenestration. The byward market is characterized by materials that are primarily brick and stone, and the streetscape shown on the right illustrates that extremely well. Both existing heritage properties and new infill buildings have been very respectful of the character of the market. There is no tradition of glass curtain walls in the market, and the fact that it is gray does not replace a stone building, which has been commented upon in the Cultural Heritage Impact Statement as a significant loss. There's a question of consistency in this committee's decisions and recommendations. Very recently, this committee looked at an NCC property on Spark Street and affirmed the fact that the materiality and fenestration of that facade was so important that it needed to be saved. And I'm simply asking for consistency in this committee's recommendations. While arguments have been made for glass, we have yet to hear an argument of why not stone. Why not stone? There are many examples of historic and modern stone buildings that are of their times and respectful of their context. Should the Built Heritage Subcommittee feel obliged to support the demolition of the existing structure, we ask that you require the NCC to revisit this design, preferably in consultation with the Federal Heritage Building Review Office and stakeholders, and develop a design which in its materiality and fenestration is respectful of what was originally here and respectful of the character of the market. And I would also like to add our support for Councillor Fleury's recommendation that there needs to be a better understanding of what happened here, because there's a legacy of other properties owned by NCC and others where we do need to know how we came to this situation so that we can address it in the future. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you for coming out on a meeting basis, as you have been. And we appreciate your input always. I wanted to say that with regard to the properties and that we see coming forward for demolition, and you and I have had a discussion about the fact that likely for the next couple of years we're going to see more where we're going to be asked to demolish, but hopefully the work that we're undertaking further to the new bylaw last year that actually only went into effect on January 1, we're going to see some changes. So I've asked whether or not we can have a report come forward before the summer on, from the bylaw department and certainly Ms. Gregoire's building services and with Sally and her team's support on what they found out, what they're doing about it, and so we'll have that discussion at this committee for information.
Well, we very much appreciate the work that's been done on demolition by neglect over the last year. Very much appreciate it.
Good, thank you very much. Thanks for coming out. I think Ms. McKenzie. Liz, welcome. We'll welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Liz McKenzie, and with the Lower Town Community Association, I sit on their planning committee. I'm also the co-chair of the Heritage Committee. On the issue of demolition, while there are varying options regarding the urgency opinions regarding the urgency to demolish the building, we accept reluctantly that the building will be demolished in the very near future. On the issue of design of the replacement structure, our objections are informed by the history of 7 Clarence, its location in the grouping of buildings on Clarence in Sussex, and its important position as a gateway to the Tin House courtyard. Protection for heritage properties is provided in the Ontario Heritage Act relating to properties in the Historical Conservation District of the Byward Market, in the official plan, and in the Ontario Planning Policy Statement. The proposed replacement structure does not respect the directives in these documents, in our opinion. Our objections fall into 3 categories: materials, footplate, facade, and use. Materials, we do not agree that the proposed building is sensitive to and incompatible with nearby heritage buildings with respect to scale, size, lot development patterns, setbacks, materials, and details. The elevations show a building almost entirely made of glass. This is not consistent with the intent of the guidelines that call for consistency with building materials. Building materials on historic buildings in the HDCD. Such a glass building would detract from the historic aesthetic of the Byward Market. Furthermore, the interior light would project intrusive glare into residential units, create light pollution, and negatively affect about 400 households living in the vicinity. The second point is scale and footplate. The proposed modern brushed glass shown on the top floors is massive and is clearly out of scale with surrounding buildings. It is taller by 18% and wider than the current building. The OP also has policies to protect the entrance to public courtyards and the pedestrian circulation system parallel to Sussex Drive. It contains policies to expand the existing courtyard system. Contrary to these policies, the increased footprint, together with the fenced-in patio, will reduce the entrance to the Tin House courtyard by up to 45%, from 9.1 metres to less than 5 metres. Together with the added building length, because there's going to be an addition along the back, and the side patio of the Blackthorn Cafe will effectively seal the courtyard at the end of a long, narrow tunnel and take away the inviting views and sense of openness. The views of the Tin House and the cathedral will be obscured. Furthermore, the increased height from 8.75 to 10.3 metres, an increase of about 18%, will obscure views of the mansard roof, and the bulk and the mass of the building will overwhelm the streetscape and disrupt the pleasing rhythm that exists now of openings on Clarence Street facades. The 2013 Project for Public Spaces study on the future of the Byward Market outlined that the privatization of public space as one of the challenges facing the Byward Market. We therefore oppose the proposed increased footprint of the new building and request that the current public access be protected. With regard to the facade and fenestration, the NCC has well-established tradition of protecting character of heritage buildings. As Leslie Mayton mentioned, it has rebuilt the historical buildings along Sussex Drive and elsewhere, and the recent approval for the removal, restoration, and reconstruction of the front facade of 106-116 Spark Street is another example of the retention of the heritage character of a building. The same approach should be followed for 7 Clarence to enhance the harmonious streetscape on Clarence. The facade should be restored, and the elements that cannot be salvaged should be replaced with sympathetic new materials. The original windmill and cornice treatment should be restored using historical photographs. Finally, the use of space in the new building should not contribute to the proliferation of bars and entertainment facilities in the Byward Market area. A recent survey indicates that the Byward Market hosts over 20,000 licensed seats in just a few blocks. This is an increase of 17% over the last 5 years, and during that time the market has lost many small retailers, including food retailers. This is of grave concern to the Lower Town residents. The increased seating capacity of establishments serving alcohol also increases the noise, vandalism, and disruptive behavior that revolve around those businesses. This in turn has a negative impact on the attractiveness of the area as a place to live and visit. The persistent loss of small retailers and service that used to make the market a vibrant destination for residents and visitors is killing the area. The Lower Town Community Association appreciates that the NCC is willing to revisit their original design for 7 Clarence. We trust that the community's concern will be reflected in the revised designs to be discussed at their meeting that they have called for March the 28th. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McKenzie. Anyone have any questions of Ms. McKenzie? Thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Clarification, Madam Chair. I just should add, and I should have said it in my report, that the future use of this building is not determined. It's being built as a flexible space. It could be a restaurant, or it could be retail, or it could be office. The zoning allows for all of those uses.
And zoning's not before us today.
No.
But thank you for including that. Okay, thank you. Next, we have Jamie Robertson. Welcome.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I'm a former military officer, so I'll speak bluntly, and I apologize in advance for that. But I am a resident of 12 Clarence Street, so I'm speaking on behalf of the residents in that building. 12 Clarence is directly across from 7 Clarence, so we've been watching the activities for the last 10 months. Also, we've set up an organization in the courthouse area called Courthouse Owners and Residents. And the reason for that
what did you say, courthouse what?
Courthouse, Tin House, not courthouse. Tin House Owners and Residents. And the reason is there's been a complete lack of information on this whole process. In fact, I would go as far to say that the NCC's earned the distrust of many of the residents because of the lack of transparency of this entire process. We had one stakeholder meeting that some of us found out about 1 week ago. There's been very little opportunity for the community to input into the plans. It came as a huge shock and surprise that A, the building was coming down, but B, we have a set of plans. And we were presented with one set of plans. It's almost like a Henry Ford choice where you could pick any color you want as long as it's black. We just heard from the NCC that there were a number of other plans. It would have been nice if the community had been consulted. So put that out there first of all. Secondly, the issue of views of the cathedral. I live directly across from 7 Clarence, and I've measured the additional space for the building, and I can tell you that all of the views will be obscured of the cathedral. You won't be able to see anything. In fact, the Tin House Court would be very difficult to see from even the street with the extension of the building and the width of the building. So I would flag that as a big issue because as somebody that enjoys the courtyards all the time, I can tell you just from watching tourists that come downtown. I've lived there for 7 years. It's a big draw. People walk into the courtyard. It's one of the jewels in the crown of the city, and I think it should be protected. The only rationale that we've heard explained so far is the reason for the expanded footprint is for commercial reasons. I'm not sure if that should be the only reason to justify the building type. A final point with regards to the glass. 2 things. One, additional noise. Glass reflects noise. It certainly doesn't absorb it. There's a lot of noise in the Bywood Market area at the best of times, but we expect that we'll hear more noise as a result of additional patio space and the fact that it's glass. And finally, as a former military officer, I would question the wisdom of putting a building clad in glass so close to the U.S. Embassy. I think this is a security concern. Certainly, the U.S. Embassy takes the matter seriously. Any kind of blast of any kind, glass is going to become a huge issue in terms of breaking off and becoming projectiles. So that should be looked into. I wouldn't dismiss it. Hopefully that never comes to pass, but as a reality. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? No, but before you leave, Ms. Coots, I'd like you to respond to some of the questions that were raised. One on the process of the application and why you just saw something late in the game.
The public notification associated with heritage applications is constricted by the 90 days once we receive a complete application. So what we did in this particular instance is as soon as we received it from the NCC, and as soon as the NCC was comfortable, we sent it to Heritage Ottawa and to the Lowertown Community Association, and then we did our normal notification, which requires notification of residents within a certain amount of a certain distance. Certainly, we are looking into a way of notifying community associations and neighbors earlier for more so there is a more realistic time frame for consultation, but certainly the time frames that the NCC does, despite our engineer saying that we don't think it is going to fall down, the NCC remains very concerned about public safety issues, so this was hurried a little bit because of that, because they don't want when the thaw begins for the building to collapse. And so we did make a commitment to the NCC as an applicant to work on this as quickly as possible. So that might have created some of the problems with the notification.
And with an application to demolish, we want that application to demolish come in with a replacement so that we're not in a situation where if the Built Heritage Committee and council support demolition, that you're left with a gaping wound forever, potentially. And so how does that piece work together? And when did that full application therefore come in?
So we, the NCC had originally, there had been some discussion that it would be only the demolition, and we asked that the two come in together. And and then the Christmas break intervened, but we said that if the National Capital Commission could have a complete application to us under the Ontario Heritage Act by February the 3rd, we would get it to this agenda, which is what we did. So it did constrict the timelines. Now, in terms of the recommendations in front of the committee today, to further guarantee the replacement building, recommendation 1 does require that the complete site plan be received prior to the final decision by City Council on the demolition of this building. So you will have the site plan in process immediately prior to, or the site plan process underway as the building is demolished.
And when does the 90 days start?
The 90 days, as it exists today, based on the application being received on February the 3rd, the 90 days start from that day, February 3rd, and so they expire on May the 4th.
Okay, and as I pointed out earlier, when the NCC was up before us, that we'll be asking for an extension of that so that we're not restrained by that timeline. And so we'll have that information prior to council and planning committee. But I have a question on the security aspect that you raised. That would not be under your purview, would it, Ms. Coots?
Security?
As far as the type of material and the vis-a-vis the proximity to the U.S. Embassy?
No, but I did, that issue was raised during the public consultation period, and I did raise it with the architect, and they are certainly, if council supports the glass construction, that glass would meet all current safety standards and would not be any more liable to damage than any other building material. There certainly are reinforced glasses, etc. So the architect assured me said that was an excellent question and assured me that would could be addressed through the materials. Similarly, many of the the issues like the patio and light spillage, etc., those are all regulated also through the site plan process. LEED also, this is a LEED building. LEED has regulations regarding light spillage, etc. So there are, it's not only the heritage application that is addressing some of these issues. They will be coming up through other planning processes.
Okay, sir, so I thank you for coming forward and raising those issues.
You're welcome. Just one final point, just to confirm again, we had 1 week's notice of, that's the consultation.
That's why I asked that Ms. Coots explain the process.
Okay.
And also that is the way that we operate, as opposed to the NCC should have come out ahead, or any other applicant for that matter. It's something that I addressed at the beginning too. I think we can do better, and Ms. Coots alluded it too. We're going to find a way to reach out earlier, but I can tell you that at Planning Committee for applications that aren't, we have a process that aren't part of the heritage, but they're applications for change or for building. I often hear the same thing. So as a city, I think as a corporation, when we can and where we can, we certainly will do better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Podolsky, Vice Chair Podolsky, you have a question?
Yes, this is a question.
It's a question to staff.
It's a question to staff. Thank you. During this discussion and the reports that have been tabled, there was the question about the role of the heritage overlay under the zoning bylaw. And the heritage overlay, states that any building that is demolished has to be replaced in the same character, height, volume, footprint, and materiality. It appears that in this case, and this would help everybody, including the interveners, to understand why the 7 Clarence is not covered by the heritage overlay. And I guess as a way of helping us understand that, I gather that it's because, having been built in 1878, with the original building having been built in 1850, it is still considered as an addition, and therefore additions don't seem to have to comply with overlay. And my supplementary question to that, Sally, is that if it's considered an addition having been built in 1878, why would the whole mansard roof of 465 Sussex not also be considered as an addition, because it was built in 1915? So here we have something that really needs clarification by Heritage or Legal Department, so that in the future this committee and the community and the heritage advocates know what the effectiveness of the heritage overlay is.
For your answer, can you turn off the mic there, please? And thank you for coming forward in advance of me even saying. You've obviously come out too many times. Sally?
First, I should add that the heritage overlay does apply. It's what section of the heritage overlay is applicable to this particular addition. So it isn't that this building does not have a heritage overlay under the zoning bylaw on it. It is what part of the heritage overlay regulates this. And the part that regulates it is not, is Section 3, additions. So the section on additions in the heritage overlay, which is a tool of the zoning bylaw, regulates the location, size, etc., of additions to heritage buildings. I should add that the additions are not, they do not flow through the age of the addition, or it is that this is considered an addition because and we've had this interpretation, and I have committed to Mr. Podolsky, to Vice Chair Podolsky, to actually have our zoning people look at this again. But it is linked physically to the building behind which it sits. It is subordinate to that building. It is considered an addition. Therefore, the Section 3 of the heritage overlay applies, and not the section that governs completely new construction of a standalone building. So the reason that the roof, but interesting question, Vice Chair Podolsky, if the roof had been added now, it would have required a variance because it would have it would have been higher than the original building, and so therefore would need a variance under the heritage overlay. In this particular instance, it is an addition, so it has to comply with the requirements under in Section 3, and there's also some peculiarities associated where the front yard is. So this project will require variances. The only variance that we have so far been able to be determined is a variance that's associated with the rear lot line.
Yes. Member Quinn?
Just a clarification, Sally. When you're talking about an addition under Section 3, does it apply to an addition to an existing building?
That's what an addition is.
Exactly. And in this case, it's replacing an addition.
Yes, and that happens all the time. We frequently have, for example, we'll just do a generic example. You are the owner of a beautiful Victorian house, and in the 1950s, someone put a vinyl-clad family room to the rear of your addition of your house. You are taking that off and putting on a new one. You're subject to the Section 3 under the Ontario Heritage Act.
Okay, thank you.
Heritage overlay, excuse me.
Thank you for that extra information. Anyone else? Okay, Mr. Fleming, I don't have anyone else registered to speak, so I think that you have the last say.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of subcommittee. A year ago, the current City Council discovered the problem of demolition by neglect. In the intervening months, this subcommittee has spent much of its time effectively dealing with examples of this threat to our designated built heritage. Unfortunately, 7 Clarence Street, a property owned by the National Capital Commission, falls into this category. Until last spring, this was not a boarded up and vacant building. It housed a viable food service business located in what is perhaps the most significant heritage conservation district in the city. It was not a property damaged by fire, but one which was neglected by its owner. We, the citizens of Ottawa, should expect more from the NCC, one of the largest custodians of heritage-designated buildings in the city. Regardless of what you recommend to Planning Committee, I urge that you use this occasion to express the city's disappointment with the NCC's neglect of this significant property. And just, I'd like to add something to, based on Mr. Scarlett's presentation. When all of those buildings along the mile of history on Sussex Drive were looked at back in the 70s, I suspect that when they were digging into the mortar, they would have probably, a lot of people probably would have reached the conclusion that these buildings had also come to the end of their life cycle. And if they had have adopted that position, then we wouldn't have these beautiful preserved buildings that we have now for the benefit of all of us. So I think a lot of it has to do with the point of view. We always talk in the heritage community about people seeing a glass half full or seeing it half empty. And I think that the NCC should have been more vigilant in this regard in this particular instance. Thank you.
Thank you for coming out, and I will reiterate what I said at the beginning. It's just very short time since Mr. Christensen has been on board, and in that time I know that he has reached out to as many people as possible, including myself. I know that on occasions he's met with our chief, what's your title, Chief Officer? Chief Development Officer? You see, when you make the name too difficult, okay, how is anybody, I don't know what Leanne's title is, okay, and I work with her all the time. So Chief Cook and Bottle Washer, Mr. Mizzi, and some other people, certainly with Vice Chair Podolsky, and what I have read, and that means just from spending time, is a clear focus on cooperation. Would you not agree, Councillor Fleury? Very much a change at the helm, and it's a good change. And we look forward to working collaboratively with him and his team. And already, so there have been some discussions that were far beyond what we've ever had talks about before, about having an understanding of their work plan that they were talking about today, as it interacts with the work that we do here at Built Heritage Subcommittee, and understanding and working collaboratively and helping each other. So I'm very positive about that. Thank you very much for coming. Anyone else? For Mr. Fleming? Mr. Fleming? Go ahead. Sandy.
Thank you. This wasn't a question, David. This was a disagreement. It's not very often I would disagree with you, but I think in this case I would, and that is your comment that this is a classic case of demolition by neglect. What concerns me about that statement is I don't think that that's what happened here. I think the NCC, this wasn't neglect, this was incompetence. I think my concern is that if we think that this new bylaw, the demolition by neglect bylaw, is going to stop this problem or solve or save this building, we're wrong. If you read the report on it, what was done here was the wrong thing. They failed to consolidate, and they used a Portland-type mortar. The Portland mortar, which is very strong, is destroying the stones, which are very weak. So I think it's important that we understand the demolition by neglect bylaw isn't going to solve this problem. And I think that's important, because the comment was made earlier, we have a bylaw coming, the problem will go away. It won't. And I'm very, very surprised to see that in the 1990s, I've been in this business for 40 years, we've always known use lime-rich mortars. How the NCC was using Portland mortars to restore this building in the 1990s is shocking. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Good information that I certainly didn't know. Thank you. Yeah. But bring it forward in the aspect of the 90s, etc. Anybody? Councillor Fleury? Thank you, Mr. Fleming. Okay, so with that being said, we're back in committee now. Does anyone have, Vice Chair Podolsky, I think you have a motion. Did you want to introduce that motion? Do you want to speak? We'll introduce the motion first.
There are two things. There is the staff recommendations that are tabled and are public, and I think that there's obviously been a lot of effort by many of the stakeholders and parties to change the the direction of the NCC state of design in this to obtain something that is more sympathetic. And the outcome of this is a series of alternative motions that have been drafted with staff help. And Chair Harder has asked if I would table them as a way to get the discussion going among the committee members. I also asked if it would be possible to get David Scarlett back again to answer some questions.
Yes, and no one has any, no? Mr. Scarlett, would you come back up, please? He has a couple of questions, but she asked me before he introduces his motion. So for questions, thank you.
Welcome back, David.
Turn the mic on again, please.
Yes. David, I think one of the things that you said was that the design of the new addition was from outside in. There are some questions which I have relating to the plans that were tabled. And the plans illustrate certain changes to 461, 465 as well, which are not subject to this application. For instance, the plans that are shown show the removal of the 4 dormers on 461, 465 Sussex. Why do the plans show that? Are they something that is intended, or is just an oversight in the drawings?
To my knowledge, we are not taking out the dormers up on that mansard facing over top of Clarence, 7 Clarence. That's either an interpretation or there's an error on the drawings. We are trying to maintain at that mansard level, basically status quo.
Okay, we appreciate that. And the second has to do with the size of the footprint of the building. You've said that it has to do with the design from outside in, but we notice that one of the arguments that is being made is that you need to introduce a barrier-free washroom on the ground floor to make the building accessible. But at the same time, the plans as tabled show that you're adding a whole new elevator into the building and a new stair, and also a portion of the second floor has a kind of open to below, so that you're consuming a lot of interior space with an elevator, with a new stair, and with this open connection between the floors. Is that something that is commercially driven, or what is the reason for that, so that the committee and the community understand?
The universal accessibility measures in the scheme see a more ample vestibule and arrival area inside. Certainly, we've tracked out where there might be circulation through the floor plate, and importantly, that elevator is in there predominantly for universal accessibility reasons. We want to be able to get any member of the public up to the second floor, be it a restaurant or a retail. We want to be able to have them get to that second floor. The elevator also serves the purposes of access of, like a delivery from the basement up, if it's a restaurant, for instance, and for questions of recycling and holding of garbage until pickup. All that can be brought down to the basement for holding rather than out into the courtyards. So accessibility is present through the whole design of that floor plan. There was a second part to the question?
The second or third part really has to do with the fact that the plans show a large penthouse above the roof of the addition, presumably to accommodate a stair connection to 461, 465 Sussex, but also to accommodate the machine room of the elevator. And that whole is a new mass above the top of the building that also helps to obscure the view of the mansard roof. And I noticed that that is clad in stone. And so can you explain a little bit more about the penthouse and the impact of the penthouse on the views towards the mansard of 461, 465 Sussex, which is a FIBRO designated building?
I'd be pleased to. Would it be possible to get the image from the courtyard looking towards...
The photograph?
Yeah, on the drawing that you have here, it's the one that is indicated as 3 and 4 on the upper right-hand corner. There's a massive stone wall there that's added, plus a penthouse.
So first I've asked Sally to help by getting the image of that. There we go. If you look, you can see that there's the Mansell windows up at the top. Our intent would be to keep those, unless I'm mistaken. Yes, we plan to keep those, no change. Below it, you can see that there's the stucco-faced 1970s fire stair, which services the apartments that are in 461, 465. We must maintain that. That is a concrete block structure with a stucco exterior facade. There would be obviously upgrades to the stair and so forth, but the basic structure must be maintained. It is the primary means of fire egress from those apartments. You asked about the stone that we see. Our intent would be that as we are dismantling the existing 7 Clarence, we'd salvage all the materials that we can, and we're anticipating like a feature wall that would be visible through the highly transparent ground floor, and even in the evening through the second floor windows. We would be deploying salvage stone on that line of stair elevator on the inside. That's what you're seeing there. If we have enough to do the whole thing, that would be great. The existing stone is friable and relatively low grade. We would not want to be using it on an exterior application. That might be just kind of looking for trouble. But certainly on the inside, that is where we deploy any salvage materials.
You haven't spoken about the elevator penthouse and the drawings that are showing that the new elevator penthouse will actually be higher than the stair that is currently shown there in stucco, and that it would come up to about halfway across the dormers that are shown there. That's what your drawings show, and we're just trying to understand what it is that is being proposed and how that impacts for 61, 465 Sussex.
Certainly there is an overrun on the elevator. That's what you're seeing partly. I'm interested in the reference to the wide expanse. If we could get the images...
Yes, well, if you look at your drawings, if you look at the drawings actually show a penthouse above the level of the proposed glazed roof that is much larger than the footprint of this little stair, and carries on about 40% of the direction to the south.
If I can call some assistance here to explain 1 second, please. We're sure that we're not confusing the tin house court facade on the other side.
No, this is specifically what is in your proposed drawings.
Who is this that you're bringing up? For the record, can I have your name, please?
Anthony Leaning, CSV Architects.
Anthony Lane?
Yeah, Anthony Leaning.
Leaning, thank you.
First, I should point out that there's an inaccuracy in the top left drawing.
They're very sensitive, and as soon as you turn your head, we don't hear you anymore.
I apologize. There's, on the top left drawing, on the right-hand screen, there's an inaccuracy. We do need an elevator penthouse for the overrun on the elevator. It's roughly 3 meters or 10 feet above the roof. So we're showing it for the full height of the mansard. It's probably slightly less, but it definitely will cover the mansard. We couldn't put the elevator in front of the stair, the stair that's required for an exit, because it would have blocked windows into 461, 465 Sussex. So it will have to be beside, and it will increase the footprint on the roof, but not as much as what you're seeing in that top drawing. I think if you look at that drawing, you'll see there's 2 shades of gray. And the darker shade of gray down there, that's the actual size. The lighter shade behind, maybe what I described as inaccuracy, is actually intended to be the tin house building behind.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Sally. Sally's clarified that is the tin house behind. So it's the slightly darker shade of gray, which indeed is our stairwell, and elevator.
Yeah, no, I read that because I trained in looking at drawings. I did not misunderstand the tin house building further to the east. It's the darker gray that we're talking about, and also the darker gray, as Sally is pointing right here, item 4, that's the size of the penthouse that is being proposed in the drawings, and what is not shown on the drawings are the 4 dormers on that roof that exists, and which we are assured now, by David Scarlett, that won't be removed. But certainly, the penthouse is going to have a visual obstruction to appreciate the mansard roof and the dormers. That's pretty clear. So, but thank you for clarifying that, because we now know what is being proposed.
Okay. While we have them here, does anyone have any other questions? Thank you for coming back up. Thank you. Now, Councillor Clark.
Thank you. Well, I noticed in Vice Chair Podolsky's motion that we're asking for an extension, which hopefully could be a safety valve, but the reality is that the building has been declared demolishable because of the cementitious mortar, which is in the John Cook letter, not because it's life cycle or anything else. It's just basically a clear-cut indication, at least in the engineer's report, that the cause of requiring demolition is related to the materials used in a 1990s fix-up. So we need to correct the report somehow or other so that it's reflected. Whether we have to do that by motion or whether we have to do it by minutes of the meeting, I don't know. Just however way you want to do it, it has to reflect that as opposed to life cycle. I think the other thing that strikes me is the absolute notion that glass is a fitting addition to the heritage building on the Sussex Street size, and as is stated in the Heritage Ottawa letter, no persuasive argument for glass opposed to stone has been given. And I would like to suggest, if you're reviewing options, that glass is probably not the most desirable option. So that I believe that as a committee we should request that NCC revisit the design and give serious consideration to the stone and materials being used. Now, I don't know how we want to do that.
Well, Vice Chair Podolsky has not moved a motion yet, but in the motion he's going to move, in the second item, it says direct planning and growth management staff to work with the National Capital Commission with respect to the height, the footprint, and the material for the replacement building. So I think that doesn't need to be clarified beyond that.
Well, except that it
you can vote against it.
No, I'm not. I'm suggesting we need to tighten it up a bit, that's all. That we need to talk about the materials more in tune with the not making glass one of the favorite options.
Anything else?
No.
Thank you. Anyone else before I go back to Vice Chair Podolsky? Okay.
Yes,
wait
just
a minute.
on
Sure.
a point of order. Yes, if my colleague puts a motion forward, do we have an opportunity to amend?
You do, and you have an opportunity to speak to it once he does.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
He has a motion, but then he also has something else that he's going to bring forward after that motion as well. So, do you want to introduce your motion now?
Yes, I'm going to introduce a motion. It is lengthier than the staff report. It is more convoluted, and it is aimed at finding a way to collegially have the NCC work with city staff and the stakeholders in a way which is, I would say, non-confrontational, let's call it almost friendly amendments. And I apologize in advance for the language of the motion, because it was partly drafted with help from the city's legal department and others. But I will read it now, and it's to essentially substitute the recommendations that are in the report.
And it's, for everyone in the audience, if you look up at the screen, it's going to be up on the screen. It's not.
So I will read it as a way to get the discussion by the committee focused on the recommendations. And what it says is that whereas report ACS 2014-PA1 or PAI PGM-0055, that's a mouthful, recommends the demolition and construction of a new addition at 7 Clarence Street, a property located in the Byward Market Heritage Conservation District and designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act, semicolon. And whereas further submissions have been made on the application, and whereas this committee wishes to allow staff the opportunity to further discuss with the National Capital Commission and other stakeholders the future construction of an addition at 7 Clarence Street. And then I'm going to add a third whereas that has just been reviewed based on the commitment by the representative of the NCC to seek advice from FIBRO, so that the third whereas would be, and whereas the NCC has agreed to seek comments from the Federal Heritage Building Review Office, and where it is recognized that the Federal Heritage Building Review Office may not provide comments as only the main building at 461, 465 Sussex Drive, it is recognized on the Canadian Heritage Register of Historic Places. So that's the additional whereases that basically are intended to send the message of this committee, if we prove it, that the NCC should go to FIBRO for advice on this edition. Be it resolved that the recommendations in the staff report, that is our staff report now, be replaced with the following. 1. Approve the application to demolish 7 Clarence Street, a rear addition to 461, 465 Sussex Drive, according to the application received by the City of Ottawa on February 3rd, 2014, subject to the receipt of a complete application for site plan approval and minor variances, if required, for the new addition. 2. Direct planning and growth management staff to work with the National Capital Commission with respect to the height, footprint, and material for the replacement building. And 3, direct planning and growth management staff to advise, prior to consideration of this report by Council, the new deadline to which the National Capital Commission has agreed for the consideration of the new construction at 7 Clarence Street by Council. And 4, issue the heritage permit pursuant to recommendation 1 with a 2-year expiration date from the date of issuance. And then there's another clause suggested that the staff review any comments that may be provided by FIBRO as part of their additional review. So there's...
Are we recommending a date for the extension? The 90 days?
No, no.
No.
No, as I said earlier, prior, and then as it says in here, prior to Planning Committee and Council, which are the day after each other at the end of March, between now and then there'll be discussion on where the flexibility lies in the current 90-day ruling from February 3rd, and what is realistic to give time for both sides and to have input.
So these are the amended motions.
So speaking to Okay. Speaking to Sandy.
Just had a question.
Sure.
So in the event that we approve this motion, well, and the NCC goes to FIBRO, and FIBRO agrees that a glass block is appropriate, then by approving this, essentially we're accepting that it could ultimately end up being a glass block as is proposed now. I just wanted to clarify that.
No. And I don't think I need a legal. I think Ms. Coots can answer this.
I think the understanding here is that that these motions will put, if passed, will put into the system or into play a new consideration, and then a new report under the Ontario Heritage Act would return to committee and council. So if that reflects the results of the consultation. So you're not approving necessarily this, because there may be, as a result of these consultations, a new design that reflects the aspirations of the community as far as this building goes.
Would that come back to this subcommittee?
Yes, that's what I said. It would come back to committee and council. Yes, it would.
Subcommittee, committee, and council.
Ms. Anta, did you have anything to verify or add?
I would just add that no matter what the comments are that come back from FIBRO, this committee, and through this committee's recommendation, City Council has jurisdiction over an application to demolish and new construction at this location.
In the city of Ottawa? Right. Over everybody. Yes, you... But I'd just like to say that even if we took the original recommendation and we did not approve the demolition, did not approve number 2, okay, the fact is that they still would have an opportunity to come back with a different application. So really, that's what we're talking about. Is that correct, Ms. Anta?
That is correct, Madam Chair.
So on the Podolsky motion, anyone have any other questions?
Yes.
Sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Ms. McQuinn?
I guess it would just be to pick up on Councillor Clark's comment, which is perhaps some wording to tighten up the question of materials. I think that, this building was always constructed as an annex to a larger and more important structure, and that is pointed out in the Cultural Heritage Impact Statement. And the idea was it would be sort of subservient almost to the original building, which was typical of annexes, warehouses, in warehouse and industrial districts, and is part of the history of the evolution of the Byward market. And so I really do think it is important that although, I think the material of this building adds not just the height and the extended footprint, I think it adds to the alteration of that role of the addition, the addition's original role. And so I really feel that talking about, using words to bring in the question of stone versus glass is just to tighten that up.
But then I think that you're getting into an area that is very restrictive. And I think we've heard in the minutes, we have lots of people that have said they don't like the glass, they want to have more stone, etc. What the Podolsky motion does is it allows that discussion to go forward. And including the materials, I think without saying, and that material must not be glass, is not...
I guess I'm not really saying that.
Then what would your wording be that you would recommend for tightening up?
Yeah, could you reread what it says there?
It's on the screen.
Okay.
I think it should be.
I'm sorry, I've got the wrong...
Well, you can get it on your screen if you want.
To the application? Okay.
And you can see all this.
Oh,
Right here.
Thank you very much.
Oh, I've got my wrong thing.
You have a special screen.
No, I don't have a special screen.
Thanks, Catherine.
Here we go.
Whereabouts are we here?
Here we go, right here. See that in their part there?
I have the original. I don't have the motion. I don't have the motion on here.
Oh, it isn't the corrected one.
No, it isn't. It's the old one.
It's the old one. Yeah. Or we could just hand you a copy and you can read it. Probably easier.
Well, I think after material, a little bracket that says in particular.
Well,
You can give them some direction. I don't see any reason that
material is material. okay? I mean, right now it is glass. So if we're asking them to review the material, obviously that would include glass, right? I mean, I don't, whichever way you vote is your decision and opinion, obviously, but I think the fact is that we have an applicant who is willing to come back and be part of a process to revisit on footprint, on height, and on material, and we've heard that. I remember one motion at Planning Committee, 3 terms ago, where somebody defined the color that the garage door must be in quite a Canada-like fashion. I don't think that we need that here. I think that we need to make sure that they understand that we're not, or we are, entirely happy with what they brought forward. So we're saying, demolish or not demolish, vote on that. Go back and work on it and extend the date, because we want you to have the time to do that. And, yeah, Member Quinn has still got the floor.
Thank you for addressing that. I think that I think you've convinced me, Madam Chair.
I didn't intend to beat you up doing it. I guess because, you know, when you think about it, I'm just going to beat him up, yeah.
Yeah, no, but it would be very disappointing, I guess, from not to see some
change,
something changed, and I don't know if it's. Well,
we're going to capture that, your comments for sure. You're looking for change.
Yes.
And I think that if you approve number 2, you are looking for change with the number 2 part of this motion. Just a minute. You don't have the floor. You do. Everybody wants to now jump in. We're going to take our turns.
Well, yeah, no, I guess I don't have a lot of experience with how this would come back, the forms, when something like this is changed and what does come back. So I can't anticipate. Perhaps others who have had that experience
none of
have
us
a better
can.
sense.
None of us can, but...
But, you know, to have a design that's been clipped, what we're looking at that's just been clipped in some ways, it will be very disappointing, so...
Well, at the end of the process, whatever that process is, that may be what comes back. We can't assume that at all. Ms. Enta, did you have comments on how the process will evolve?
I believe that Ms. Coots has discussed the process, and I will turn it over to her if there are any questions. This is intended, once that discussion and review occurs, to come back through to this committee, rise to Planning Committee, rise to City Council. In terms of fundamentally pointing out or restricting conditions, I think that while conditions on a permit to require minor changes can be considered, it's my opinion not in order to look at conditions on a permit for a building that's fundamentally different than the application that's been brought forward, which is why I believe the motion has requested for additional time to allow new design ideas to come forward to this committee for consideration.
Yeah.
Thank you. Trustee Podolsky, also for you, Sandy, after the meeting, I just have been told that NCC would like to discuss with you your comment about the type of material used on the stone. So you'll have that. Unless you'd like them to come forward and answer that, then you'll have that after, okay? Trustee, Vice Chair Podolsky, please.
Chair Harder, I would like to speak to this motion now. I think that I would like to urge members...
Just a minute. I want to make sure... No, if you're going to talk to it, it's his motion. He gets to close on it. So if you want to speak to it, you're going to speak now, please.
I still think that it doesn't hurt the motion if we put a bracket after the word material, in particular looking at stone materials that would be compatible, something along that line. That gives direction, doesn't give, you know, any all-inclusive only type attitude towards it.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Podolsky?
Yes, Madam Chair, I would like to speak to the motion now, and I'd like to have my colleagues here support the motion in full without any further amendments giving specific direction to the NCC. I think the NCC has got the message from the community, from Heritage Ottawa, from the Lower Town Community Association, and from members of this committee, that what they have tabled is not exactly what is expected of the NCC, given that the NCC has been the leader in heritage conservation for over 40 or 50 years in the national capital, and that the Sussex Drive expropriations, which took place in the early 1960s, were for the express purpose of saving Sussex Drive and the adjacent properties as part of what they called the Mile of History. It was not for commercial purposes that it was expropriated. It was for what Sussex Drive properties contributed to the character of the national capital. And over the decades, we have seen a number of their buildings along Sussex renovated and restored. We've also seen buildings that were necessary for demolition through fire and other reasons demolished but reconstructed by the NCC using the original materials. And we've also seen some infill buildings that were constructed by the NCC along York, along Sussex, that were very, very compatible and well received and demonstrated their commitment to the character of the Mile of History, now Confederation Boulevard. We've also seen the NCC initiate in the 1970s an innovative approach to developing the courtyards behind the Sussex Drive buildings. This courtyard system is exemplary. It has been widely published and followed by others, and it was done very, very sensitively with attention to the backs of the buildings, with attention to the surfaces and the animation of these courtyards, and also the views. The views that were developed, particularly opening up the prospects towards the cathedral to the north, are something that were exemplary. I think that it is also recognized that the neglect of certain buildings contributed to the demolition, and 7 Clarence, in a way, having been owned by the NCC for 50 years, indicates that there is some responsibility here for making sure that the stewardship is up to the standards which we advocate for others. So having said all that, I'm comfortable that the generic recommendations in this report are sufficient to have the NCC take the message and come back again with alternatives to staff having agreed to consult with stakeholders, including FIBRO. So I don't really think that we should sort of kill the lily by adding specifics to it. I think that they understand very well what is being expected. So for that, I would advocate the approval of the motion.
Thank you. So on the motion, on the Podolsky motion, which I can't find a copy of. Oh, yeah, I gave it to you, Carolyn. Thank you. You think we were afraid to kill trees or something here? Okay. Can you, Vice Chair Podolsky, can you, your additional wording that you've... Okay. So as I said, I'm going to break this up so that we can decide whether or not to approve the application to demolish 7 Clarence and have that go to Planning Committee and then Council at the end of March. So on the first recommendation to approve the application to demolish 7 Clarence Street, a rear addition to 461 to 465 Sussex Drive, according to the application received by the City of Ottawa on February 3rd. 2014, subject to the receipt of a complete application for site plan control approval and minor variances if required for a new addition. Carried? Thank you. On the second one, direct planning and growth management staff to work with the National Capital Commission with respect to the height, footprint, and material for the replacement building. Carried? Thank you. Item number three, direct planning and growth management staff to advise prior to the consideration of this report by council the new deadline to which the National Capital Commission has agreed for the consideration of the new construction at 7 Clarence, so that's beyond the original 90 days. Is that carried? And 4, to issue the heritage permit pursuant to recommendation 1 with a 2-year expiration date from the date of issuance. Carried. And then, whereas the NCC has evaluated, well, I'll just add this one. This is the one that was added that Vice Chair Podolsky spoke to after the main motion. And whereas the NCC has agreed as a...
This is the whereas is added by the legal department, not this one.
Okay.
This one, and then that is one of the resolutions.
Okay.
So it's that.
All right, sorry. Then I'll get rid of this one. 2 pieces of paper, and it's still confusing. And whereas the NCC has agreed to seek comments from FIBRO, and whereas it is recognized that FIBRO may not provide comments as only the main building at 461 to 465 Sussex Drive is recognized on the Canadian Register of Historic Places, therefore be it resolved that staff review any comments that may be provided by FIBRO as part of their additional review. Carried? Yeah. Thank you. Good work, everybody. Good work, I mean, because in addition to all of you and all of your input in a very short period of time, and thank you to the NCC who I know listened to that input and are reflecting on it. But to all of you here, I mean, in particular the citizen members who have so much knowledge on heritage, we really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Pardon? Yeah, and so do I have to approve? I don't think so. This is a replacement motion, yeah. It's not an amendment. Okay, thank you. And so item number 3 now, which was held, I'm sorry for the delay, but it is what it is. 30 Oriole, and we have, I don't think that we're doing a presentation on this at all. You have to put a picture up, please. And we have 2 speakers. Mr. Vice, were you planning on coming up by yourself, or? I have Leisha Lynn listed. As part of your group? No. Not part of my group. So who is Leisha Lynn? Oh, okay. And you wanted to speak as well? Yep, that's fine. Thank you. And we need another chair.
Oh, Sally, we always like you along.
Okay. Welcome, Mr. Vice.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I want to have Cynthia Jacques from Novatech Engineering with me. I have Mrs. Freeman, and Mrs. Freeman has a hearing disability as well as she is legally blind. Her daughter, Janet, and the real estate agent, Mr. Paul Major. I don't think you'll have to speak to any of those, but they might be able to answer questions better than me, just having become involved in the file the last couple of weeks. If I can give a little bit of background, Madam Chairman and members of the committee, this house was built by Mrs. Freeman's husband in 1968. I'm told, and I have no ability to disagree, that it certainly has some Frank Lloyd Wright ideas in it. It maybe mimics Frank Lloyd Wright. I'm also told, anecdotally, that there's all kinds of these throughout the city of Ottawa. Mr. and Mrs. Freeman lived in the house until sometime in 2013. The house has been deteriorating in the last number of years because of Mr. Freeman's inability to maintain same and the inability to pay for the normal maintenance, let alone the extraordinary maintenance that this building needed. Mr. Freeman passed away in December of 2013, and their children demanded that their mom sell this home so that she could get into a retirement home. In the meantime, she is living with her son. She consulted a real estate agent, and after he inspected the house, he advised, given the physical condition of same, that the only potential purchaser would be for lot value. The house was listed in mid-January 2014, this year, and there have been a lot of showings, and any showings indeed have been people only want to offer for lot value. In fact, the agent advised this morning that he has an offer conditional on Mrs. Freeman providing a demolition permit. Don't want to get into the cost of that for Mrs. Freeman, but that's the offer. On February 12th, Mrs. Freeman received a letter from the Heritage Section advising that they would be recommending the property be placed on the Heritage Register. What are the repercussions for Mrs. Freeman? Firstly, the agent has to provide any potential purchasers with that information. Further, should the committee recommend to Planning Committee and Council that the property be placed on the registrar, and should Council eventually add the property to the registrar, then the owner is required at that time to provide Council with 60 days' notice in writing of their intent to demolish. I'm told that then staff would look at it and see if it merits designation under, I believe it's Section 34 of the Heritage Act. So we have a lady, blind, hard of hearing. I'm sure she can't hear a word I'm saying right now. She has to sell this house in order to get to a retirement home. And the house is mimicking something that Frank Lloyd Wright did. She, as I say, that if she has to commit to providing a demolition permit, and this timeline is followed, the value of her lot, and I'll call it a lot for purposes here today, is going to be worth less than 50% of the value. Presently, it's costing Mrs. Freeman $2,500 to $3,000 a month to maintain the home. The home is electrically heated, and I'm told there's some kind of a section where the heat rises from the underlings of the building, an older concept. So $2,500 to $3,000 a month to maintain the building. I ask if this is any way to treat a person in Mrs. Freeman's position, or for that person, any property owner in the city of Ottawa. To the best we can determine, this house is not even on the Heritage Reference List. Not there. She would have no idea that this was possibly going to happen, or would her husband, who was quite interested in heritage matters. The recommendation or the request of the section came from the Royal Architectural Institute. They sent a letter after one of their members went in with a real estate agent under the guise of wanting to purchase the property. Would have been very easy for them to ask us, or ask Mrs. Freeman, I wasn't involved at the time, if they could get in. I don't think they had to enter through a back door, so to speak. I had the occasion to go out yesterday because Mr. Major, the agent, said, you have to see this place. So Mr. Jacques and I met him at the site. And we had, because of the amount of mold in the building, we decided to wear masks prior to entering. Ms. Jacques has some photos that were taken yesterday just to show you the condition of the interior of the house. So I'm going to ask if she could just simply pass those around. They'd be very brief for you to look at it. There's only 7 photos. There were others taken, but
I just wanted to tell you, Mr. Vice, that you're over time, but the clock is still running, so we'll have to take consideration for the fact that we're passing out pictures.
thank you, Madam Chairman. I also ask my other clients could have had the time if I get a couple of minutes of their time. They're not going to speak, so my client isn't going to speak, or neither is Ms. Jacques, other than to just advise as to where the pictures were taken. Thank you, Madam Chair, for that indulgence.
Thank you. I don't know whether you're, I just have a couple of questions. Are you finished speaking yet?
I just want to add, Mrs. Freeman's son is an engineer in Philadelphia, graduate of Carleton, he told me when I spoke to him yesterday. And he told me he helped his dad build that house. He told me further that, and the architects in the committee would probably know better than this, but it was, if you can see the foundation, it's a brick-type foundation, and that foundation has proven not to be very good. Now, I'm going on what he tells me. And that is part of the problem now, that the foundation is giving away. He was up for his dad's funeral and looked at it at that time. But he tells me that that is, these brick blocks are not in a very good shape. So they're basically my submissions, Madam Chairman, other than I will be asking you not to accept the recommendation. But if you have any questions of Ms. Jacques with regard to the photos, she can answer those. I can answer any other questions the committee may have.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? We don't.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you for coming. I will ask, I lost track of the other lady. Leisha Lynn, please, who is a neighbor, I understand. Is that what you were saying? Yes. Well, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson and member of the committee and the staff of the city for giving me the opportunity to come here to speak. My husband and I moved in the house behind 30 Oriole in 1990, so we've been there for a very long time. Every winter and the spring, we see Mr. Freeman go up to the roof to see to check, and I think we understood later that the house, there was a lot of leakage, a lot of water damage inside the house. It has a lot of mold, and also because we don't go into the house, so we can see from outside that the bricks are crumbling. And we had an opportunity to went in to see the house when it was in the market in last month. Inside there were lots of mold, lots of water damage, and in my submission, the house it's not safe to live in. That's my opinion. And so my position, my husband and my position is we oppose to adding 30 Oriole Drive to the City of Ottawa's Heritage Register. So, I don't know.
Thank you. Unless somebody has a question, but that's fine. Thank you for coming out today.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I also want to thank you, Leslie and Anne, for providing the information and answer my question in a very timely manner. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So no one else registered to speak, bringing it back to the committee. Peter Clark. Councillor Clark, did you have some comments to make?
Certainly. I believe that designating this as heritage property in order to prevent redevelopment in the area in general is probably an inappropriate reason for doing it. I look at this and say, I've looked at the pictures, it's even worse than I imagined, and I don't think that restoration is one of the options, so I am not going to support this this particular application or report.
Anyone else? Question of staff? Vice Chair Podolsky?
Just a question to the staff on this one. Can you elaborate a little more than what is in the report on the reasons for adding this to the register? That would be helpful.
Through you, Madam Chair, as it was mentioned by one of the delegations, we received a request to add this property to the Heritage Register. The Ontario Heritage Act only requires an address to add a property to the register because the only implications associated with it are providing the notice for demolitions. So our reasoning is that when it was built by Mr. Freeman in 1968, that he was inspired by the right of Mr. Wright. You can see some of the examples here. And then it was a direct copy of one of his residences of a certain style.
Anything else?
Is this in response to just this one request by a member of the RIC, or is this part of a larger effort by city staff to identify mid-century modern architecture that could be candidates for putting on the heritage list or for designation? I think that's important for this committee to understand as well.
We only had, it was a response to the one request. We did receive comments and support from the Rothwell Heights Property Owners Association and Heritage Ottawa. And I think it's a part of, I don't know if it's a part of a larger initiative, but the city does have an initiative to undertake more studies of modern architecture.
Yeah, it's just kind of astounding that we can play around with people's lives because one person sends in a letter. I mean, seriously. Member Quinn? Okay. Member Smallwood?
I'm not sure that we could characterize this as one person sending in the letter. I understand that Heritage Ottawa and the Community Association are also in support. So I don't think it's one person. Well, I think these things often start. I recall sitting at the table here, Member Podolsky suggested we look at a building down in the Breton Flats area. It was one person that started it, but these things lead to other things. I sympathize with the plight of the owners, but I do take issue with a couple of the, or I think perhaps take issue is the wrong way of putting it. The issue was raised about financial hardship caused by designation, and I think that we should listen very closely to that. It's not the first time that it's come up. Any time that we look at designation, we are often looking at negative financial implications. So I don't think as a committee, as much as these may concern us or as much as we may sympathize with the building owners, I don't think we have the ability to take financial considerations into play when we're making our decisions. So I think that we have to be very careful. Although we may sympathize, I don't think that can play any role in our decision. Similarly, I can understand and sympathize. I live in an old house. I have designated properties. I know they cost more to maintain, and I know sometimes they're very difficult to maintain. Sometimes we're saying we're concerned about demolition by neglect. I guess, are we now saying that we should determine whether the neglect is done by somebody we don't like as opposed to somebody we do like, and if that person who's neglecting has other reasons, maybe health or other reasons why they're having to neglect their properties. But nonetheless, the end result is the same. We're still looking at a situation where property is being neglected. I think where I'm torn on this issue is I'm not seeing a strong support in this particular, the design of this particular house and the importance of this particular house. And I guess if I were to support not including it, it would be because other members more learned than I could convince me that this is not an important house and it shouldn't be on the list. I trust our staff feels that it should be, and the Heritage Ottawa feels it should be, and so I support their concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? So in this case, as you know, in the last, a year ago, we gave designation to the Briarcliff area. It was complete area that really was, it defined itself and continues to define itself. And just for everyone's information, at the April meeting, we're going to be talking about, have a presentation from Councillor Wilkinson, who is going to be bringing forward with the support of staff, a big project that they're going to undertake that some students are actually doing research on now for Beaverbrook in Canada. And again, it is a story, the complete community of how it was built and the time it was built and what it still continues to be today is really, in my mind, that is the story. In this case, I'm not going to be supporting this. I heard what you said about somebody being in rough shape themselves financially, wellness. I didn't appreciate the fact that Mr. Vice told us a couple of times the health conditions of the owner and the situation. We can't make our judgment on whether or not somebody is in a poor position when we're being asked to provide. And I just want to say, this is a heritage register, okay? This is adding it to the heritage register. Okay, so it's not a designation. So really the only thing that applies is that if you were wanting to demolish it, which we're hearing that you want to demolish it, that you have to come back here and request that. Whether that's onerous or not to a realtor or somebody buying the property is not part of what we can consider. So having said all that, just speaking for myself personally, I'm not supporting the application for reasons that are totally, because I didn't know any of the other personal stuff when I read the report the first time and the second time. I don't see, I'm not going to make this one from somebody who was a big supporter and admirer of the work of renowned American architect Frank Lloyd Wright. Those words itself are telling to me. That would be like I looked at Good Housekeeping and I decided that I liked the style of a place in Vermont and I replicated it because I liked it. I don't see that that has real teeth. So, but that's just my opinion, and if no one else has anything to say, I'm going to, do you want me to call yeas and nays?
Yep. Sure.
So we'll call yeas and nays on 30 Oriole, and the exact motion is that Built Heritage Subcommittee recommend, that Planning Committee recommend that Council add the property at 30 Oriole Drive to the City of Ottawa Heritage Register.
Councillor Quinn, or Member Quinn?
She just elevated you to Councillor, but she said Member Quinn.
Probably would be an improvement.
I'm sorry, yay or nay, right? Yay.
Member Smallwood? Yay. Councillor Hobbs? Councillor Moffat?
No.
Councillor Clark?
No.
Vice Chair Podolsky?
Yes.
Chair Harder?
No. So it fails.
3-3.
3-3.
Added to the registry. Okay? That's the first time that it happened, and we'll have to make sure that Councillor Hobbs doesn't leave for any part of the meeting in the future. All right. So I think that we are at the end of our yes. Okay, so any notices of motion, are you okay for quorum? Any notices of motion? None? Any inquiries? Any inquiries? No? Any other business? No? Are we adjourned? Good, thank you. Next meeting is Thursday, April the 10th.